But now I will hand over to our fantastic panel and also to Liz. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Richard. And thanks for joining us for what promises to be, or I hope is going to be, a very heated discussion on the future of the office. Last year there was a lot of talk about zombie space in the UK. This year we're hearing about ghost office space in San Francisco, where the vacancy rate has apparently surged to 24% since the pandemic, which is extraordinary, really. There have been a lot of false dawns in terms of the great return to the office. You've got some tech companies saying work from home in perpetuity, whereas some financial institutions want people back in the office 5 days a week. You can throw into the mix the increasingly stretching ESG targets, the war in Ukraine, soaring energy and material costs, and general economic turmoil, and the future of the office is far from certain. So what do tenants want? What do their employees need? And what are investors demanding? These are some of the questions I'll be posing during the discussion on the future of the office. At the end, I hope to have a few minutes for some questions from the audience, so please get your thinking caps on. But let's first have some introductions from the panel. So I'm going to start at this end. Jens?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jens Böhnlein. I'm the Global Head of Asset Management Sustainability for Commerz Real. We have a large portfolio across the world in close to 30 countries, 17 billion under asset management, and a lot of office space.
Good morning. My name is Brian Gaffney. I'm from a company called Murphy Mulhall, based in Dublin. We are an independent commercial property agency specialising in office agency, both on landlord and tenant representation and investment.
Perfect. Good morning. My name is Dennis Köpp. I'm with Chorus Group. We are a GC with built-in capabilities to do design and fit out and consultancy for our clients in all respects in what we talk about today, office furniture, modern office and sustainability, those type of setups.
Good morning, everybody. I'm John Mulqueen from CBRE IM. We have around 150 billion of assets under management, institutional fund management. Around 10 billion of that is in the office sector in Europe, and I'm the head of offices, so I look after that particular part of the business.
Good morning. My name is Asim Alami. I'm heading the origination from Berlin Hip for the international part of our business. We have offices in Amsterdam, Warsaw, and Paris, and the international key account in Berlin. We have a loan book of approximately 30 billion, of which about 70% is in Germany.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Arkadiusz Rudzki. I'm representing Skanska. Office part of our business. Skanska is a Swedish construction development company. We do offices, we do resi, we do industrial. We are present in 3 geographies, Nordics as a home market, US and Central Eastern Europe.
Thanks very much for those introductions. I mentioned earlier about San Francisco and this ghost office phenomenon. To what extent is Europe and the UK being haunted by ghost offices? And how do we meet the challenge? So can I put that question to Asim first, please?
So the question is, will we see ghost offices in Europe?
Or are you seeing it? Are we seeing it already?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that we do see real ghost offices. The urban tissue of American cities are very different from European cities. The markets are very different. What we see, though, is that there's that companies take the presence of their employees more seriously, and that they actually verify more closely what the average occupancy is. In Berlin Hip, I think we never really took a close look at how many people were in the office. Now we do, and now we see the occupancy is relatively low. It's I would say around 30%. But the question is how low was occupancy before COVID, right? So that there's a comparison problem that we have. And in the end, to be brief about this, I'm a strong believer in the office, that the office is a place where people come together and work together, and there's an interaction that you cannot replace. Otherwise, you have mercenaries working at home. So I do strongly believe that.
That's a strong word, mercenaries working from home.
Yeah.
Is that what you think of the working from home phenomenon then?
Well, that would be the alternative, wouldn't it? If we would just leave everybody at home and if they don't have any emotional and further connection to the company, right?
No, yeah, fair point. John, what sort of vacancy rates are you seeing in terms of office space across various markets?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I understand this term ghost offices for the US. I think I agree with what Assam said in terms of the fabric of the society. I mean, if you think about the way that people travel to the office in the US compared to Europe, where we typically use mass transit, I think there's a fundamental difference there, and we're seeing that in the way that the markets are. We don't have ghost cities, certainly. I would say that the cities are becoming vibrant again.
But we have ghost parts of cities, don't we? I mean, the city in London has been quite quiet compared with, for instance, the West End.
Well, again, I think it depends on how you look at it. When you look at statistics about people returning to the office, I think in aggregate over the whole week, that's quite right. We're nothing like pre-pandemic levels. I think that really is a reflection of the flexibility that employers are giving to their staff. But I would say, certainly anecdotally, if you travel even to the city, and my office is in the city, at least 3 days of the week, it feels very busy. And there are times now in our own office where people are complaining that they can't find a desk. So I think, I think we need to be really careful about how we look at the way that offices are used overall, and not to use pre-pandemic metrics to see whether offices are worthwhile or not.
When you say that desk space is short, is that because people have shrunk their office requirements and downsized?
No, it's not. I think there's basically becoming a peak moment when people are coming into the office. So as we've all heard that office occupation is strongest during Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah.
So
and that lovely word
absolutely, which I won't quote, but I would say that certainly during that middle part of the week, the office feels as busy to me as it ever did. And I think that people are coming into the office with a preconceived idea, probably because they're hearing that people are not in the office. They come to the office and they find it's very, very busy. So I think we need to be very careful about how we look at occupation levels and how we maybe manage them, and that's probably something that will come out during the course of the conversation today.
I hope so. Jens, what's your view? Is this a peculiarly American problem, or?
What I could say to Asim's point, I would completely agree. There's a big difference whether you have properties in the US in the larger cities like New York or San Francisco, where you can really see there's a drop in occupancy rates, or if you compare it to the European cities. If you're commuting in the US like 2 hours to your office in the morning and in the evening, it might be a bit challenging, and you've just learned during Corona that 4 hours of your day could be spent more wisely to other things in life. We do not have that problems actually in Europe, so you usually not commuting more than 15 to 30 minutes. And yes, there's a change in office, but that change, how you operate the office and how you actually have the space being built has been there all the time. So office is constantly changing, and now there's basically just a new solution we have to identify. To your point, I think ghost offices in the US, I would say that's a serious threat to some of the larger cities. And it's not only the point of people returning to the office, also the point of how the office have aged in the meantime. There's like office buildings which are like, built in the 80s or something. So from a technical point of view, they're not up to date. You would have to spend immense tons of money to make it compliant to today's operational requirements. And the question is, as an investor, would you want to do it? Yeah, would you rather buy something new? And this, I think, is an interesting point. If it comes down to the US markets, I do not see that happening right now in Europe.
Okay, Arkadiusz, what's your view on the current vacancy rates?
Of course, we're developing, so I can speak in behalf of tenants or occupiers we are talking to. So we're not holding assets as Skanska, even though we have a few in our portfolio, but this is not long-term holding. But basically, I think I agree with everything which has been said here, but I think we can't generalize. I think it's also important to look at the industries which the tenants are representing. Some of the companies are really like more shifting into hybrid, of course. But a lot of companies also is pushing the employees for being back in the office, and I think maybe it will be sad what I would say, but let's see what winter will bring. So I think this will be also a push for a lot of people coming back to the offices, taking into consideration the energy consumption, the prices. So some research says that the average occupancy in Europe in offices is around like 50-60%, the presence in the office, depending on the industry, but average, let's say. And some people say, the research says that it might, go up to even 70-80% during the winter time. And it may change basically the dynamic in the longer term, obviously, when people will be back. Especially.
So that's such an interesting point about energy costs going up. I think that's going to force or encourage people back to the workplace, and employers can pay for your energy rather than you at home.
Not
right?
only energy, it's going to be energy, coffee, maybe some food in the office, and so on. So it's like very pragmatic, I would say. And basically, they are the incentives which has been all the employees trying to use to bring people back.
Yeah.
But now very pragmatic and very simple aspect may really like boost the...
There are other more basic
move back,
pushes. But And Brian, what are your thoughts? What are you seeing on the ground?
It's very specific. I think all the guys touched on it in terms of the actual sector like seen in the Dublin market. A lot of the I suppose SMEs are pushing for people to come back to the office. I suppose companies where you might have 1 to 100 employees, Irish-based companies that I suppose can control their staff in terms of trying to entice them back to the office. But the larger, like there's such a large number of tech firms, global tech firms like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn have their European HQs in Dublin, and we're seeing that they're still struggling to get staff back into the office. So I think whereas the likes of professional services, your accountants, your solicitors firms, your lawyers, they probably benefit more from having staff in the office, whereas the tech firms like Google, Facebook, for example, have probably shown over the last 2-3 years that they can work as effectively from home, and it doesn't impact on their ability to do their job. So it's a harder task for those companies to get staff back.
There's a correlation, isn't there, as well, between how much people are paid, and therefore they have nicer sort of homes. They can stay working from home from them, whereas in sort of poorer paid professions, if you like, people have smaller homes and they want to go and work in the office. They don't want to be working and living and doing everything in these.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because with tech firms, especially, there's such a concentration of them in the Dublin market at the moment. They're the ones that are, I suppose, have taken so much space over the last 3, 4, 5 years, but they're the ones that have the lowest occupancy rates at the moment. So there's a bit of a kind of a strange dynamic there at the moment.
But Google's pushing, isn't it, for 3 days back?
They are pushing, but like that, you talked about the ghost office, and whether some of these firms at the start of COVID, there was talk of firms offloading space and subletting space. You can't see the likes of Google or Facebook letting any alternative occupier into their campuses. It's just not going to happen.
Won't do that.
So they'll just keep office space, and there is space. Anecdotally, Facebook are developing a new HQ in Dublin, and they've shelved plans to fit out part of it because they're just reviewing their options at the moment. So it's and that. That campus is at the moment is for sale as an investment, and that will impact on the investment because realistically you have a lease signed, but ultimately if Facebook aren't occupying all of the campus, it's going to have an impact.
It's going to be quite an interesting time, I think, for that market in the next few months. Dennis, what are your thoughts on the sort of likely vacancy rates post-pandemic? Where are they going to settle down to?
Okay. For us, or the trend that we see here is that, there is no general line, or it's very segmented in the market. That's what my colleagues here in the panel said as well. So like in Germany, we see in those big areas like Berlin, Frankfurt, Munich, we see also some tendencies, what my colleagues described, that the companies are struggling to get better control back over the employees, and the tendency from the employees themselves is, okay, let me stay in my home office, I feel more comfortable, more cozy in my place. So it's very difficult to foresee a kind of general trend to say, okay, like years before it is boom and the whole industry goes like this. I think we should prepare ourselves to look more into something that is sacramented in each region, and then also in the technology or in the business that has certain needs, as what my colleague said before, that tech industries have probably different background and different requirements, and they are probably more up for some video conferencing solutions, those type of things, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I guess the question is, where does this leave the 5-day week? Is it dead and buried now? What does the new norm look like? John, can I put that question to you, please?
Yeah, I think if you're looking for any positive that came out of the COVID crisis, I think we could all say that there was a big leap forward in terms of the acceptance of agile working. So pre-COVID, there was a great amount of skepticism about what people were doing if they were not directly in front of you. So I think that's changed. So management now accept that in some cases it's more efficient for people to spend their time working from home. I'd challenge that personally. I think really what we're seeing, as I said before, is we have 3 core days. I think those core days are becoming 4 days already. There is a feeling that as we enter into a harder economic time, if there's going to be a downturn, there may be a desire for people to strengthen their networks informally and formally back into the office. So I can see how Monday will become busy as well. And there's been, again, lots of conjecture early into the crisis about how people would start to either force their people back into the office or just give up on the idea altogether. And I think, as we've seen, both of those things are 2 extremes that is just not happening. And I think what we really need to focus on is how you create an environment in the office which encourages people to choose to come in.
Yeah, so it needs to be a positive choice rather than a sort of a stick approach, doesn't it? It's got to be carrot.
For the long-term future, I believe that's right.
Asim, so what do you think in terms of how we should encourage people back to the office? What does this carrot look like?
Well, I would repeat part of what you just said. I think incentivizing people to come back to the office, there are 2 things we need to highlight. One is the comfort, the saving energy, or having a nice coffee, or a nice surrounding, nice desk, etc. But also there's I guess what you could call a purpose to be there, which can also be linked to the ESG identity of the company. So there's a message was transported, but also to the interaction, how these things match together. Why? And I think what you said, the employee has to have an answer to the question, why am I going there? Is it only because I am ordered to be there, or is there a reason why it is good for me to be there?
And did you want to come in here, Arcadius? Go on.
If I may chip in this topic, I think it's the trend when we observe is it's called hotelification of offices. So it means it needs to be attractive. Like you travel, you pick your hotel. Yeah. Where do you want to stay for longer? You are coming back potentially. So it needs to offer more than you have at home, actually. So it needs to be nicer. A lot of companies right now investing, selecting the offices with the ESG credentials, because this is more important for the, of course, investors and the companies, and for employees itself. All the energy saving features and aspects related to that, and the impact on the CO2 emission and so on and so on. But also design is extremely important at the moment. So the functionality of the indoor space is changing as well.
So hotelification, lovely design, ESG credentials. Dennis?
Yeah, I would love to add what my colleagues said here before. The cooperation part is very different in an office environment that is modern, flexible, that gives you the opportunity to meet instantly with your team, to discuss things. And I guess that makes also a big difference. And every employee, especially if in our days, everybody works in teams and in multiple teams, with different roles, it gives more flexibility and it's more up to speed. Yes, we all have Zoom Teams, whatever, all this type nice tools, but it's very different from just grabbing a coffee, get 4 people around a small table and say, okay, how we manage this or how we going to fix that. That's much more efficient, it's more effective, and I think that's also something what a lot of employees and also, let's say, team leaders, managers realize, that this cooperation part is really limited in the home office setup. I don't say it's not existing, I'm just saying it's limited.
It's actually also quite limited in a lot of office setups though, isn't it? Workplace setups, they're not really configured to foster proper collaboration. I mean, Dennis, quickly on, what do you think needs to change about office design and fit out to?
No, I think we see over the last years already trends. Of course, due to COVID and the pandemic, and now the, let's say, the latest developments, it's speed up and faster. So we see more multifunctional spaces. So seeing, it's not like the employee wants to go to an office, has his desk, and he sits 8 hours at this desk, and then he goes home happily. No, it's just for a certain task, he sits on this particular desk. For another group meeting or anything that instantly come up, he went up to a collaboration area and modern meeting spaces and this type of things. We see this from a constructional perspective also in the ratio, how much meeting rooms you have today instead of what you had, 10 years ago. Then the rooms itself, the modern technology, interfaces, all these type of things are much stronger and much more appreciated and used as before.
I'm going to come to Brian and then Jens afterwards.
Yeah, just on that, we were involved in an office acquisition for a law firm, and I think the conversation around their acquisition back, I think at the start of, I suppose, pre-pandemic, was obviously they had 21 partners in the business, and they wanted obviously all cellular offices, and they wanted a very specific requirement in terms of the layout of the space they wanted. We ended up taking space for them, I think it was earlier this year, by the time the deal finalised, and now they're in space. It's open plan. None of the partners have their own individual offices. So that whole, I suppose, pandemic has forced them to relook at how they occupy the office space. They would have never have looked at open plan offices prior to the pandemic, but now to realise in terms of how they collaborate collectively as a team, it works better for them all on an open plan basis rather than kind of cellular offices, which law firms traditionally would have had. So that's interesting in terms of how that played out over the
and it's a bit
period.
More resilient in terms of if there's another pandemic, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. I think that point was made. But in terms of where they moved, they were very much kind of a traditional location within Dublin, and they moved to somewhere slightly on the outskirts, and that would never have entered the conversation 2 or 3 years ago.
It's so interesting how things have changed. Jens, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just to make it a bit more complex, I believe that complexity will remain, and there's no simple answer on how the office is going to look like in the future. I mean, what we're going to face is really a challenge that companies have different views how they want to operate, different markets they have to engage with, and this is something that will continue, and it's just not good enough to add some color to the wall and have some open desk environments. Just to add some more complexity, just 2 points. I think the demographic change is hitting hard now, the office sector. And this is the reason why investors, owners and tenants have to think about what the future of the office may look like and how they can be attractive to young talents. Like 10 years ago, you were able to pick and choose from 10 people, whether you just want to have one in your environment. Now you actually go to the people and say, well, we are a great company, do you want to work for us? So this has really flipped the coin, and this will change the way we understand offices going to look like. Another point I'd like to add, just as some food for thought here, when we all entered Corona, we knew each other. So we were working in environments with people we knew for a couple of years. We had celebrated and had a beer together. And then it was, I think, a kind of an easy way to move into a virtual environment. Now, like 3 or 4 years later, in some companies, maybe 20, 30, 40% of the entire population has changed. So there are new people in the company, which in some areas have never seen their colleague in real life before. And the only thing how you can solve this is by meeting in the office. And that's why I strongly believe that the office does have a purpose. It's not only about communicating, it's kind of sharing ideas, sharing some fairy tales, telling about your wife, your kids, whatsoever. That's what's happening in an office as well, and gives you purpose. And last point, from my view, we also have to think about how the future of learning can look like into the office. What we see is that a lot of tenants are facing some serious issues that the labor force does not have all the knowledge they need for their business. So the office will also become a place where people learn. And especially for the young people which are now entering the office, this is a really smooth way, to engage them back with the office and especially with the company. The office is just another tool which you have in your pocket. It's like something you you can put on the table, but the purpose of the company has to come across, and learning and sharing ideas is a good way to do so.
So what you're talking about, but you've not used the actual word, is collaboration. That seems to be at the heart then of the future of the office. John, what's your thought on that? Is that going to imbue everything going forward, the need for that?
It's interesting because I hear people talk about the office being the place for collaboration, and that home is the place for focus. And I don't believe that's true at all. And I think Dennis touched on it earlier. I think it's entirely wrong to think that any of us, and I think it's unhealthy to think that you sit for 8 or 10 hours or whatever it is at your desk staring into a screen doing Zoom calls all day. In the same way, it's not that healthy to go into the office and just bump into people and chat and collaborate all day. And I think what we're really looking for is a balance, and as humans what we like to do is let's sit down and collaborate with our team, and then I'm going to go and sit in a room for an hour and really focus on the thought, that idea, that nugget that I've just picked up in the collaboration, and make something of it. And then I might need a smaller meeting. And I think really the challenge for designers and for owners and occupiers is to think about how you use the office space in a much more flexible way and provide a suitable place for people to do all of those things. And you used a phrase earlier, better than home. It has to be better than home for all of it. And if we do that, then I think there's a real future for the office.
I think it's a really good point. Assem, I mean, how do you think we make the office better than the home?
Well, again, I think there are, let's call them opportunistic aspects such as comfort and saving energy, and then there's I think the other aspect, which is purpose, which is not emphasized strongly enough, and maybe also because it's somewhere between the landlord and the tenant to organize that, what the purpose of the stay in the office is. Is there a mission of the team? Is there a identity which they want to be part of? And actually, I think the latter is much more important. It will be the key to success, whether the people will just be there for a moment because energy prices go up, or will they be there for good and because they identify with that space of living where they will spend a large part of their life.
Yeah, I mean, it is going to, I think, but it's a huge challenge, isn't it? And you've got all of these other factors to consider, like ESG, which has really come to the fore in the last few years from nowhere, really. You've got the race to zero very much on, growing number of lenders issuing green bonds, and there's a lot of talk now of green premiums and brown discounts. What are we actually seeing on the ground, and where do we expect this to go? Can I put that to you, Jens, quickly?
Well, yeah, thank you very much. As I said, I'm responsible for asset management and sustainability because we actually figured that there's going to be a threat, especially on that topic. And right now, very much taxonomy has driven capital flows into, let's say, green investments. We haven't seen the tenants out there yet, but I always call it the second wave. Yeah. And it's not far ahead. The CSRD is going to come in place in Europe in 2 years' time. At that point of time, corporates will have to report on ESG KPIs, which are public. So everybody can see how you operate as a company. And people also, I think, want to work in companies which do good. Yeah, so that will become even more important, I believe, just to offer those types of products for our tenants. And coming back to your point, is there a discount or a premium? If you want to have the best building in the future to get the highest rents, you just have to tick off the ESG pocket as well. Otherwise, you won't get the highest pricing. So the question really is, do you have it or do you not have it? I think that's just a black and white question. On the other side, there will be opportunities for buildings which are not green yet, just to convert them and give them a second future. So maybe that's a point for the rest of the group. But for us, I think we took that clear direction. It's one of our pillars, that ESG is really a strategy for us, and we try to implement it in all products we do.
Okay, yeah, Dennis, I mean, can you pick up on this? So what do people need to do to improve the ESG credentials?
Okay, it depends, of course, on the level of investment you would like to do. There are, let's say, quick wins and fast things, and there are really substantial changes. I think the key topics or the key elements are here: collaboration furniture, that change a lot. The spacing, a modern spacing of the whole SCAD. I spoke earlier about the ratio, meeting rooms, more flexible meeting rooms, those type of things. Then a very important part is also, even if it sounds quite funny, but it's the green plants, hanging plants, those type of things, dividers in the modern spaces to give more flexibility, to make those collaboration from multifunctional teams possible. And last but not least, a very important part is the integration of technology. And here it comes where the money gets in or where the budgets are usually spent heavily, because that really depends on the on the operation of the business, what they want to do, how they want to do things, and on which level. And I think there is plenty of space, what Jens said earlier, to make a difference also for the future employees and this type of things. I think the run or the win of the best talents for companies is not only due a nice website and whatever, a great company presentation and whatever, a Facebook representation. No, it's in our days, let's say the young people, they want to feel they want to work in a cool environment. It should give them the feeling we are special. It's something I'm valued as a person, and to transform this into something that is a great design and also is, on the other hand, cozy. The people want to feel homey since they have this experience from home office and so on. To answer your initial question, I just walked a little bit away. I think it's very difficult to divide this, particularly in wins and lose. Like you win on the green side, you lose on the brown side. I think it's very dependent on the market and on the specific, let's say, office space you have and what it offers, and the region, right?
The reason I ask is because a lot of people are saying that the attention has shifted from green premiums to brown discounts because it's taken as read that you're going to have some ESG credentials there. Brian, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I think there's a growing disparity between, I suppose, older buildings and obviously new builds. I think one issue, I suppose, at the moment is the cost for refurbishment to get from obviously an older kind of 1990s, 1980s, 1990s building up to a standard that will meet the ESG requirements for a company at the moment that has to tick the box in that regard. But the cost for refurbishment is an issue at the moment. We're seeing that anecdotally in Dublin market, where there's older buildings on the market that investors won't look at because they don't meet the ESG requirements. But also other parties that don't have the ESG requirements are restricted from looking at them because of the cost it is to bring it from X to Y in terms of the refurbishment costs. So that is an issue, but we are seeing also in the market in Dublin that there are definitely some landlords that are putting a premium on rents for buildings that are top of the class in terms of ESG credentials, and obviously those buildings will hold if there is a predicted downturn coming. Those buildings will hold in terms of rents, but buildings that aren't ESG accredited or are a long way off from meeting the standards required will struggle.
The problem is, I mean, if you look at the UK, I mean, half of companies or something like that haven't got their heads around the EPC ratings change, have they? John, what are you seeing on the ground? Are you seeing green premiums, brown discounts?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about green premiums, brown discounts. Is there a price differential, is what we're saying? And I think it's clear there is. There's clearly a price differential. I would say actually that I think that the cost of creating those green buildings, you're quite right, it is increasing. But what I would also say is that I think the imperative to have those buildings is increasing. So actually, it's not even a brown discount. I think actually, if it's a brown building, it's off the list. And so, for an investor's perspective, it's not even a choice. So, from that perspective, I think it's clear that something has to be done. What I would say, though, from a positive point of view, is that this is probably one of the best opportunities for the occupier and the investor to work together. We hear lots of talk about the impact of brown and green premiums and discounts when it's around new leasing or new development. And of course, because that's the most obvious time it's done, investors do make that, put the capital in because they expect the return. What I think we need to start looking at is the standing stock, and to start thinking about how investors and occupiers can work together, because one of the dislocates we have is the investment that's made by the investor typically pays back to the occupier. So if you change the M&E, cost the investor, but the occupier will have a reduced impact on the environment and a reduced cost. So there needs to be some discussion between the parties to make that accelerate the work that's done by the investors.
And a bit more collaboration between the two, I guess, as well.
Completely, and they're mutually beneficial work.
And what about there's lots of other economic headwinds as well, and lots of pressure on it. What does this mean on the ground in terms of rental levels and yields? What are we seeing there? Can you...
Back to me?
Yeah.
So again, we've heard this phrase, best and the rest. And I think it's very clear, again, that there are pockets of undersupply in the market where I believe that rental growth actually will still be very strong. I think that obviously we're looking at there's a potential downturn coming, but over the longer term, I'm expecting some quite significant rental growth from the very best locations, from the very best buildings, because they're supply constrained. And I think when investors recognise that, then of course the values increase because the risk reduces, and that's the way the investment market works. So I think there's definitely a really interesting dynamic developing there. We need to probably wait a little while longer because obviously the markets are in a little bit of turmoil at the moment.
Yeah.
But in the longer term, I think that's true.
Anybody else got a view on rents or yields?
I think John's point is well made. There will be a flight to quality, and over the next, I suppose, as the market does enter a period of uncertainty, the best buildings and those in the best locations will probably hold value. We are seeing in the Irish market that obviously buildings in the suburbs, in the suburbs of Dublin, for example, there's less of a demand for those buildings, and that'll just decrease over time. Over the next, if there is the headwinds as predicted, there will be the pool of purchasers for those type of buildings will decrease, purely on the basis of the quality of them.
So are we going to see a bit of a divergence in the market between primary and secondary space? And how does this also translate in terms of traditional office space versus flexible space? I mean, lots of people are talking about flex being the future. Anybody want to pick up on that one? Arkadiusz.
I pick up on this as we have flex operator in our portfolio in Poland. So we also are dealing on daily basis on it. Especially now, a lot of people is asking how to incorporate the flex into an office building as an amenity. In the past, you had several amenities like a canteen, restaurant, some grocery store on the ground floor, and that's it. Right now, it needs to be much more, and actually, it's also related to ESG. Before I jump on the flex, it's super important how the amenities are structured right now on the ground floor of our projects, or in the places which we develop as developers, or the landlords are reletting the buildings. It's super important right now to boost also the comeback to the office for the employees. But coming back to the flex, right now the average occupation of flex offices is around 85%. So it's much higher than before. Of course, the pandemic slow it down, but right now over the last months we see huge increase of the presence and interest of the companies. in flex as such, but also in also combining flex with core. And we as Skanska, we have an offer for our occupiers, which is called core and flex. So you can lease from us the space, core space, maybe a bit limited because you are not certain what would be the future of your business, but you have an option for growth, having a flex. So, but the question is also how the investors will appreciate it, because it was always the, I would say, you know,
it's hard to value, isn't it?
The hot potato, I would say, is
Yeah.
in the past, that the investors saying, okay, if you can avoid flex, it would be better. But right now is we want to have the flex, but it shouldn't be more than 20%. I think it's going to be growing, even up to 30-40% of the premises, as the importance of flexibility in the leases as such, and also within the workplace is growing, and this is very much will be a big topic for the next years.
Yeah, and I guess that will be a way that some people think they can future-proof the office to a certain extent. We've got time for one quick final question to the whole panel. Keep your answers nice and short so I can get a couple of questions hopefully from the audience. How confident are you about the future of the office, and what do you think that office looks like? Can I come to you first, Jens?
Still believe strongly in the office because it has been there for many years and decades. It's going to stay for many decades, but it has to adopt as it has always been before, and provide some changes. And a lot of the things we said is not only about furniture, it's also about digitalization, and likely there will be another layer when we will have like classes which have a transparency layer, so we can have digital information and the real life information, and to bring that together in one world. So that's the next challenge future
Sounds
of
quite
the office going to
actually.
is.
Dennis?
Yeah, sure. I would say I can support what my colleague here said. The technology integration will be a very important part. Also, the feeling of the employees at the end is very important. That translates into modern furniture, very flexible furniture. Of course, also the whole setup, the whole design concept will be more specific. So nobody wants to work in a stereotype of environment anymore. And I think that's where the future will go even further.
And you're quite positive?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Great. Arkadiusz?
I do offices, so what should I say? Of course. No, I think the offices will remain a center of gravity for the companies, for the cultural issues, learning issues. This is what has been said. This is always a place where people will be coming to integrate with others, with the colleagues, and to really get a sense of belonging to the organization. So this is the most important aspect of offices. It's not a place to work only, but it's the place to integrate, socialize. So this is center of gravity for each and every company, basically. You mingle with people, you meet your colleagues, you can learn, you can improve yourself, you can be promoted, because it's hard to promote people if they are not in the office. How to assess their work. So I'm a strong believer that it's a good future of offices.
Good. Brian?
Yeah, I think there's, like that, just reiterating what the guys were saying, I think it's going to be, the office is going to be key to companies going forward. I don't think there's going to be any move away from that. There has been a cultural shift over the last 2 years in terms of the flex work from home element, and that argument has just been brought forward. It was coming anyway. I think over the last couple of years that element has come forward, but I think what Arkadiusz was saying, the office is central for all companies, and that I don't think that will change.
Good. Hassan?
Well, as I said, probably the first statement on this panel, I'm a strong believer in office. However, I want to take up a phrase said by a CEO of a French real estate company who said, "Office is dead. Long live the living space." You know, it's all about living quality, actually.
Very interesting. And John?
I couldn't be clearer. I'm absolutely committed that the office sector has a fundamental part in what we do, in the way that we work. I think it needs to be, as we said earlier, flexible, both in terms of how it's used and how we lease it, amenitized. It needs to be tech-enabled. And if we can do all of those things, I have no doubt that the office market, as we have seen, is one of the fastest evolving and the most interesting.
Fantastic. Have we got time for one question for the audience? Have you got a question for this expert panel? Don't pass up the opportunity. No? Not at all? I'm going to ask you a question then. I want to know how confident you are about the future of the office. Very confident, neutral, or not very confident? So a show of hands, please, if you are very confident. I don't know whether to include these people at the back. Okay, neutral. Well, there's only one neutral. Not very confident. Okay, lots of non-participants. That was actually a win for very confident, but perhaps we're preaching to the converted here. Thank you very much if you were watching this online or on demand. Thank you very much to the panel for your expert insights, and thanks also to the audience for listening.